Greetings all, this is Rick Levine with your July 2024 astrological forecast. You know, these are pretty intense and strange times, and I don't think that we're going to get resolution on a lot of issues as quickly as we would like. And I know that a lot of people in the United States in particular are quite concerned over what seems to be unfolding in our upcoming presidential election. Before I get into the material at hand and before I talk about a few of my events coming up, I just want to share with you a couple of quick quotes that I came across that I thought were particularly relevant in these times. The first one is a quote from the sociologist Brené Brown. In her book, Rising Strong, she wrote, "Disappointment is a powerful teacher. It reminds us to reassess our expectations and find strength in resilience." I'll say more about this when I get into the transits of the month, but I think it's relatively self-explanatory as to the disappointment and concern that many people have about the upcoming presidential election. And I'd also like to share a very short quote by Deepak Chopra, and I think that this is also quite relevant. Deepak Chopra wrote, "All great changes are preceded by chaos." And I don't think I need to say any more about that at this moment. Before I dive into some of my upcoming events, I just want to express my appreciation to those of you who follow me here on YouTube. And I just want to remind you that it really helps me out if you subscribe to the channel, turn on your notifications. And of course, for all other goodies, make sure that you're on my email list. And you can get to that by going to www.ricklevineastrologer.com. And as I've mentioned before, each month I will be doing a drawing from those who are on my mailing list. And a winner is picked from the email list. This is done by my assistant, Gail. She does the actual selection using a program on a site called random.org. And each month she downloads the entire mailing list, and each person is assigned a numerical, a number based upon the order in the email list. And then she uses the program at random.org to pick a number. And this random number this month was 7513. And that number belongs to, and here we need the drum roll, to Susan Schmidt. And Susan, congratulations. You will receive an email from me with instructions on how to schedule your free natal chart mini reading that focuses on harmonic aspects. And remember, if you're not on the email list, just go to www.ricklevineastrologer.com and sign up there. Your information will never be shared with anyone else. You won't be deluged with emails from me. However, you will receive notifications about my YouTube channel posts, other online activities, some event notifications, and random astrological updates. I want to remind you all that the July astrology night at Soul Food will be on Friday night, the first Friday of the month of July, and that'll be on July 5th. And of course, as always, we will be live streaming that, and you'll be able to go to my YouTube channel and get the link for the live stream event, and it will be available for those of you who don't watch it live. You'll be able to watch it later on. Also, for those of you who are in the area, This will begin in Redmond at Soul Food Coffee House. This will begin on Friday night, July 5th at 6:30 p.m., and it will be available online at that time also. And just want to mention also that in the months ahead, the dates will be August 2nd. That'll be the first Friday in August, September 6th, October 4th, November 1st, and that takes us up to December, and there won't be one in December because I'll be in India. I would also like to announce at this point in time, I've mentioned this before, but I will be teaching a course at Kepler College, and I know many of you know that I was a founding trustee of Kepler, and our work on that began back almost 30 years ago. Back in 1994 was when we began to work on the Kepler College project. And this is, however, the first time I'll be teaching a course at Kepler. And this course is an introduction to harmonic aspects. And the course will kind of go over the theoretical basis of harmonic aspects, the evolution of aspects in astrology in general, and I'll be presenting harmonic aspects in a very practical and usable framework. I'll be relying on material from sacred geometry, and students will be taught how to integrate aspects based on non-zodiacal relationships, and this includes quintiles, septiles, octiles, noviles, reptiles, kitchen tiles, turnstiles, infantiles, and all the tiles. And if you're interested in pursuing that, you can go to Kepler College, and the link will be down below in the comments. It'll be the pinned first comment down below with all the links that I'll be mentioning here, but it is keplercollege.org. All right. Then I also want to mention that at the end of August, I'll be at the UK conference called Diverse Perspectives, All Themes Considered, and this is the Astrological Association of Great Britain. Information on that is available at the astrologicalassociation.com site, and again, the link for the conference is down below also. And this is going to be at the Leonardo Hotel conference venue, kind of up near Leicester, Birmingham, up that direction. And I look forward to seeing many of you there. I'll be doing a pre-conference workshop, and I'll be doing a talk on the program itself. In September, for those of you who are Astrology Hub Inner Circle members, I'll be the Inner Circle guide for the month of September, and you can always find out more information about that and other events on Astrology Hub by going to astrologyhub.com. What a surprise. Then, the exciting conference, or at least for those of us in the United States, probably what will be the most significant conference of the rest of this year is the OPA retreat. And OPA is the Organization for Professional Astrology. And this retreat is called Awakening, celebrating the Aquarian shift, Connect and Learn. And this is going to be at the New Park Resorts in Park City, Utah, a beautiful place outside of Salt Lake City. And the information on that conference is on the opaastrology.org website with the specific clickable link again down in the comments. And this is going to be an unforgettable retreat. It's going to be October 16th through the 21st. And basically, there's an opening day of plenary session lectures. There'll be 5 lectures. I'll actually be doing one of those lectures. But the bulk of the conference will be 3 days where you'll be in a small group working with a particular astrologer. And this is very exciting because this retreat is for all astrology enthusiasts, whether you're a beginner, serious, or professional. And basically, you work with one person for 3 days in a small group of 6 to 9 people, and it's hands-on astrology, a lot of self-referential work on our own charts. There's a fabulous faculty. All the information is online, and you get to actually, when you register, you pick which group you want to work with. And I mean, there'll be people like Lynn Bell, Gemini Brett, Ann Orderly, Sam Reynolds, Christopher Renstrom, Kira Sutherland, Moon Zlotnick, Donna Young, and there'll be several people doing peer group work. It's going to be very exciting because you get to work with someone in depth. Each person that does a track has a very specific curriculum. You can read about that. And when you register for the conference, you register for which track you want to be involved with for the 3 days. If you're interested, register soon because the tracks do fill up. Some of them are already either full or almost full. I think there's still room for, 2 people left in my track, but they will fill up. And so it's important that you go to the site, you look at it, you decide, which track you'd like to be involved, which track you'd like to take, and sign up sooner than later. And then the last thing I want to mention in calendar year 2024, a reminder that I will be back in Goa, India, doing the initiation into astrology. This year it's going to be November 23rd through December 4th. This is 12 days of full immersion. It's an astrological experience that can and will change your life in as much as it's in a beautiful, magical, spiritual part of India, Goa, India, on the Arabian Sea, a short walk to a gorgeous swimmable beach. It's at an Ayurvedic healing spa. This is I think it's my 13th workshop retreat that I've done with Heaven and Earth Workshops, and we'll pretty much combine the best of all my previous teachings. We do a lot of experiential work, astrodrama, a lot of class work also, and I'm looking forward to it. And again, it's likely that this will fill up. It's limited to 35 students. And if you're interested, check out the information at heavenandearthworkshops.com. There's a day-by-day events and schedule and curriculum, so you really know what you're getting into. And Heaven and Earth Workshops does an amazing job from the moment you step off the plane in Goa to the moment you get back on the plane. You're in good hands, and the information on this is on the website. Also, next year, just very, very briefly, I want to mention the Convergence 2025 in Orlando, Florida. This is on March 7th through 9th, and you can find out more information on this by going to cosmicpatternsconference.com, and the link also will be down below. There'll be 24 speakers from all around the world delving into a variety of astrological tools and techniques, including vibrational astrology, and I'll be presenting a pre-conference workshop and a talk in the conference schedule also. That's March 7th through 9th in Orlando, Florida. And then the last thing I want to mention is the Association of Professional Astrology in the Portuguese Association of Astrologers. And this is their international congress, and the title of the congress is The Age of Change. And this is going to be next May, and I know that's a bit far off, but for many people it takes kind of thinking that far off to schedule time, especially if you're here in the United States and you're traveling to Europe. This is going to be in Porto, Portugal, at a gorgeous facility. I'll be doing a lecture and a workshop there also. And that kind of takes us through what I have coming up. And now let's jump into the month ahead. Okay, we are looking at a chart for noon on Monday, July 1, and I am recording this incidentally on the evening of June 30th, on Sunday evening, but we're going to start off looking at the chart for noon on July 1st. And all charts that we look at, unless noted for the new moon and full moon, all charts will be for noon Pacific time. That's Pacific Daylight Time, and all charts are basically here with Aries rising because there's no ascendant midheaven in houses, because the horizon is based upon where you are on the planet, and there are people watching this that are all over the globe, and so I use an Aries rising here to keep things simple. But when we look at this chart, we can see that we have the Sun, Venus, and Mercury having all moved into Cancer, and part of the import of what happens through July is that these three planets, Mercury first, then Venus, and then the Sun, will each move from Cancer into Leo, and I'll say more about that in just a moment, because that wave of those three planets really does kind of set up the meaning, or a lot of the meaning, of the month. The other thing is that we have several planets still left behind in Taurus. Mars and the moon, as we begin the month, is in Taurus. The moon having just made a conjunction with Mars earlier today. And when I say today, I'm always referring to the chart that we're looking at here. Today is Monday, July 1st. And we are still several hours away from the moon catching up to and conjoining Uranus later in the day. Actually, it'll be early tomorrow morning, because we can see that the moon at noon at 18 degrees is about 7, almost 8 degrees away from Uranus. And since the moon moves at about 1 degree every 2 hours, we know that the moon will actually line up with Uranus in about 15, 16 hours, roughly. And so that will be on Tuesday morning. All right. Now, the other thing here that I want to point out, and this again is another very significant piece of the month, the outer planets are not moving very fast right now. In fact, they're barely moving at all. You know, we've had this spurt of moving forward from late last autumn on through the beginning of this year. All the outer planets turned direct, and then one by one they've been turning retrograde. Pluto and Saturn have already turned retrograde. And as we open the month, Neptune on July 1st is at 29 degrees and 56 minutes. And tomorrow on July 2nd, Neptune stations at 29 degrees and 56 minutes. But here's the crazy thing, and that is that Neptune has been at 29 degrees and 56 minutes since June 27th. And it remains at 29 degrees of Pisces and 56 minutes. It remains there all the way through July 7th. And here's the thing to keep in mind, is that even as we move all the way through the month to August 1st, by August 1st, Neptune is at 29 degrees of Pisces and 41 minutes. That's a quarter of a degree. It's 15 minutes of arc that Neptune has moved in the entire month. I mean, that's a quarter of a degree. Compare that with the moon that is moving, 12 to 14 degrees every day, or the sun or Mercury, which is moving like a degree a day. Neptune is barely moving a quarter of a degree in the entire month. And on top of that, even though Pluto has already turned retrograde, throughout the month of July, Pluto also moves less than a degree. We open the month with Pluto at 1 degree of Aquarius and 19 minutes. And at the end of the month, it's 0 degrees of Aquarius and 39 minutes. It moves less than 3/4 of a degree. And for that matter, we have Chiron also barely moving all month. It turns retrograde. We'll get to that a little bit later in the month. Chiron actually stations retrograde on July 26th. At about 23 and a half degrees of Aries, but it's at 23 and a third of a degree of Aries even at the beginning of the month. And so we're seeing a pattern here of the outer planets holding their positions. Even though they're turning retrograde, they're still moving very, very slowly. Saturn, which turned retrograde last month, Saturn at the beginning of the month is at 19 and a half degrees, actually 19 degrees 25 minutes of Pisces. And by the end of the month, it's only at 18 degrees and 33 minutes. It barely moves 1 degree for the entire month. So what does this mean? Why am I dwelling on this? What I'm dwelling on is the fact that these deep structural changes that unfold slowly with the outer planet rhythms are just not happening this month. They're holding their position, and when planets go retrograde, they're closer to Earth than they are at other times in their cycle. And so even though they're not moving very fast or not moving barely at all, they're strong. And so there's a lot of energy tied up in these outer planets, which really acts as a turning point. But it's not something that happens overnight. It's something that'll take weeks, months to unfold, and it won't really be until the end of the year and even next spring, when these planets turn direct again, that we're going to get the movement that we may be craving for right now. What this also means is that the action of July is basically high frequency. What do I mean by high frequency? I mean the faster moving planets that are like the violins and piccolos and flutes, and they're the upper register. That's where the action is. Meanwhile, the bass notes, the stand-up bass and the trombones and the tubas, those are the outer planets, and they're more chronic. In fact, the word for Saturn in Greek is chronos, and things that are chronic really settle in time. And so we have the deeper sense of the rhythm of time holding its position, while onto that we have the noise of the faster moving planets. And there is a significant amount of noise in July. And remember, just because these higher frequency planets are not chronic, they're more acute, it's often the acute disease or upset or symptoms that actually trigger the deeper events. And we're going to see a ton of that through July and August, even on into September, October, and November, because the inner planets, the Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and even Jupiter are quite active right now. So we begin the month on July 1st with the Sun making an exact half square to Uranus, which is a destabilizing energy. Half squares are like squares. They're motivational. They make things happen. Uranus is, the planet of shock and surprise. And so on July 1st, we may end up seeing something that is certainly surprising. We've been in that realm already for several days, but we may see something that is that changes things a bit as the Sun makes its half square to Uranus late in the day on July 1st. So we may see this over July 1st, 2nd, and so on. But it's Neptune that is making its station, and you can see even in the chart for July 1st, there's a little S by Neptune. That means it's stationary, but it technically turns retrograde tomorrow on July 2nd. And let's look at the chart for July 2nd. We can see that the moon has now moved into Gemini. And in fact, that the moon switches into Gemini at 8:50 a.m. this morning on Tuesday, July 2nd. And so this lightens the energy some, especially because that moon is heading toward a conjunction with Jupiter that will occur really early, very early tomorrow morning. The moon at early degrees of Gemini is sweeping through Gemini today on July 2nd, but Neptune is actually now technically retrograde. But if you notice, it's still at 29 degrees and 56 minutes. It hasn't even moved 1/60th of a degree, nor will it for several days more. And so that Neptune is really, really important. And again, when a planet is stationary, it holds its energy in a very powerful way. And we have today Mercury moving through an exact trine to Neptune, setting up an energy that we're going to see repeated 3 times during the month. And those 3 times, and I mentioned this earlier, have to do with Mercury moving from Cancer to Leo, which it does. In fact, it moves into Leo at 5:50 a.m. this morning on July 2nd. But Mercury moves from Cancer to Leo on July 2nd. And then we have Venus moving into Leo on July 11th. And then the Sun moving into Leo on July 22nd. Now, the reason why each of these events are more significant than just a planet changing signs, and just changing signs is significant. When we move from Cancer, which is introspective, Mercury, communication in Cancer has been indrawn. We've been holding our energy. We've been thinking about things and feeling them, but maybe not expressing them. And now, as Mercury moves into Leo, it's like the show begins. We want to say it. We want to express what we're feeling, what we're thinking. We want to turn it into action, into doing it. We want our words to have impact. And so that in itself is significant. But what I want to point out is as each of these 3 planets, Mercury, Venus, and the Sun, change from last degree, the anaretic degree of Cancer into the first degree of Leo, they're each going to trine Neptune. Neptune at 29 degrees and 56 minutes is 1/15th of a degree away from being at 0 Aries, which is the start of a whole new cycle. And because Neptune is now turning retrograde, it won't reach Aries until next year, until early next year. And this is so significant because we're so ready for the change, and yet Neptune is holding back. And into this, Mercury makes this trine to Neptune it's exactly trine Neptune very early this morning at 4:53 a.m., just an hour before it meaning Mercury, moves into Leo at 5:50 a.m. And then Mercury, by tomorrow, the 3rd, will oppose Pluto, and it does that very early in the morning, actually just after midnight Pacific time. Mercury will oppose Pluto. And each of these 3 planets, Mercury, Venus, and the Sun, are going to trine Neptune, increasing our dreams, imagination, fantasy, detaching us from reality, moving us into the realms of possibility and potential and even delusions. What's real? What is true? It may be hard to know when Mercury is trining Neptune or in any of these 3 planets. But once it moves into Leo, it's then already picking up on the opposition to Pluto, and that is very powerful. This is confrontational, deep energy that is being brought out from the hidden realms into the obvious realms. Remember, Pluto is dynamic transformation having to do with hidden power that is being resisted, and there's a sense of dominance and power struggle, and often because Pluto is that which is hidden, it's unconscious coming out into the open. And so as Mercury opposes Pluto, we may actually see this whole process of obsession and trying to force issues and make our point. And especially because at the same time, the moon is just moving from Taurus into Gemini, and the moon is actually making, therefore, a trine to Pluto and a sextile to Mercury. And so there's movement here. There's real movement in thought, in ideas, in communication that we're going to see on July 1st and on through July 2nd, even as these planets, even through July 3rd, when Mercury actually makes its opposition to Pluto. Now, also on the 2nd, remember we have Mercury making a trine to Neptune, but we also have Venus making a trine to Saturn. And this Venus trine Saturn is actually a grounding energy. This is something that gives us something that's real, that we can rely on, whether we like it or not, whether it holds us back from what we want to do. You know, Venus in Cancer is not very outwardly expressive, but it's loving and it's considerate and it's, what's the word I'm looking for? It's compassionate, it's kind, it's caring. And the fact that it's trining Saturn in Pisces is also this energy of compassion and of kind of, it's almost like what we don't say may be kinder than if we actually say it or act on it. There's a sense of holding energy in. And remember, Venus over the days ahead, Venus will actually, by the 11th, it will make a trine to Neptune. And so we can see the reality of its trine to Saturn, where we know what's going on, even though the Mercury trine Neptune today is still fuzzing us out. As Venus makes that trine to Neptune coming up to the 11th, it will go through that same process as it trines Neptune, then moves into Leo, and the show begins again, and it opposes Pluto, and we'll see that unfold as we get to that. But back to the 2nd, actually, let's move to the 3rd. And on the 3rd, we can see that Mercury is now past the exact opposition to Pluto that occurred again very early in the morning, just after midnight. But we're also now pushing on to something else that's occurring, and this is about Mars. Mars is an important player this month because Mars actually will catch up to Uranus, and it does that on the 15th. We'll get there in a few minutes. And this is something that is building all month. This is something that happens like a bolt of lightning striking. It can be physical. It releases built up tension. It in itself is neither good nor bad, or it actually can be either or both good and bad. Sometimes it's hard to tell. It's basically the lightning striking and releasing whatever the tension has been held. But back here on the 3rd, we have Mars actually moving over the next couple of days, moving into a sextile with Saturn. We can see here on the 3rd midday, it's almost 18 degrees. It's 17 degrees 58 minutes. And if we move this ahead a day at a time, there it is on July 4th, Independence Day in the United States. On July 4th, we have Mercury making a square and a half to Saturn. Again, this is a bit of resistance. This is a bit of a reality check. We don't get away with what we want to say, even though Mercury in Leo is saying things and it's expressing perhaps more freely. The fact that it's it's making that square and a half or sesqui-square to Saturn. It's kind of bumping up against authority. That's on the 4th. We have the moon also moving towards the end of Gemini. And it actually moves into Cancer at 1:51 p.m. just afternoon today, and of course the United States is a Cancer, meaning that it was born on July 4th. Later in the day, we will see that we are coming into a new moon that's not exact until tomorrow on the 5th. But we can see that this energy of Cancerian, the feelings, the protection of home and family, that energy is certainly building. But coming here back to the 4th, we can see that Mars is getting closer to its exact sextile to Saturn, while we also have Mercury making that square and a half to Saturn. So authority and rules and law and the reality is really leaning on us rather heavily, and it might be it feels heavy, but as Mars makes that sextile to Saturn on the 5th, it's almost like we get to move that energy. This is like the self-restraint or the restraint pays off. There's something here that has movement. Again, this is real. This is, Saturn is authority. Saturn is the rules of the road. It's the speed limit, so to speak. And Mars in Taurus is less interested in going fast than it is interested in getting to where it's going. There's that sense of determination. But remember, over the week ahead, over actually the week ahead, Mars is moving closer and closer to its conjunction with Uranus. That's exact on the 15th, so it'll actually be almost a week and a half. But things are becoming less stable. There's this sense of something's got to happen. We don't know what it is. And at the same time, we have this new moon in Cancer. The new moon in Cancer today on the 5th occurs at 3:57 p.m. And when we look at that chart for 3:57 p.m., we see the exact new moon occurs at 14 degrees of Cancer in 23 minutes. And what's significant about this new moon is that we have a couple of other aspects that are very significant. There's no direct aspects to the new moon itself, although the moon and the sun are close to Venus. Venus is moving faster than the sun, so the sun won't catch up to Venus, but the moon will sweep through its conjunction to Venus over the next day. But I think the most important thing here is the fact that Venus is making a square to Chiron, and this is the discomfort of how we want to be. We want to be compassionate, that Venus in Cancer wants to take care of those we love. But because it's square Chiron, somehow it's not working the way we want it to. And the fact that Jupiter is at the midpoint, it's halfway between these energies. Jupiter is making a half square to Chiron on one side, and it's actually that Jupiter half square is kind of setting us up like maybe we want to accomplish too much. Maybe we're trying to do too much and it's just not working. There's something here going on that's making it more complicated because perhaps we're biting off more than we can chew. That may be a good way of saying it. The other thing about this new moon in Cancer is the fact that it's really emphasizing the watery side, the emotional side, the fact that we have Saturn and Neptune both retrograde now in watery Pisces, and the new moon and Venus in Cancer. There's this tendency to act on our feelings, or to have our feelings really kind of managing what's going on, even though Mars in Taurus is going to follow through on what has been started. So that's part of what's going on here. And, and again, Venus moves into that exact half square with Jupiter on the 6th. And so there's this sense that, again, Jupiter is suggesting that we're biting off more than we can chew. We're taking on more than we should. And in some ways, if we take on too much, if we're too overconfident, if we're too sure of that we know what's going on or we know the outcome, we might end up running into trouble. By July 8th, we come into a couple of, and by the way, also on the 6th, we have the moon moving into Leo, from Cancer into Leo, in the evening, 8:55 p.m. And as the moon moves into Leo, again, the energy pushes outward even more. Here is the 6th at noon. The moon is not yet in Leo. It does that later in the evening. But by the 7th, the moon moving through Leo is actually catching up to Mercury. And this is, again, energy being expressed outwardly. As we move to the 8th, we have a couple of important things happening on the 8th, 9th, and 10th, even into the 11th. And I want to say, I'm not sure that it's going to play out this way. I want to say that here's a few days of potentially good energy. There's possibilities of things flowing in the way that we would like them to flow, even though it may have felt like, or it feels like, the energy is kind of bottled up. Why am I saying this? First of all, Venus makes a sextile with Uranus. Remember, we're coming off of the Mars making a sextile with Saturn, which held the energy in and said determination and follow through. But now we have Venus making a sextile with Uranus on the 8th. And this is about having feelings that don't necessarily fit into what they're supposed to. We're attracted to something new and different, and we're doing it because in some ways we believe that we'll feel safer. This is Venus about feeling. We feel like we'll feel safer if we hold this energy in and we wait for the right moment to act. But on top of that, the same day, we have Mercury making a sextile to Jupiter. And this is about saying what's on our mind. So we're getting it from both directions here. The Venus-Uranus is making breakthroughs emotionally, but we're in some ways expressing it intellectually and through our actions, as Mercury in, kind of express it outwardly, Leo is making a sextile with Jupiter, which is still feeling its oats and feeling its way through Gemini, where anything goes. Jupiter in Gemini, the upside of Jupiter in Gemini is that opportunities come one after another, possibilities. There's a sense of confidence. The downside is that the opportunities don't necessarily pan out, and we're pulled in many directions at once, and sometimes we might try to take something on and find out that it might have been better to let it pass. Again, we're able to talk a big game. We're able to say things in a way that sounds like we're really confident, but it doesn't necessarily mean we'll be able to do it. And yet there's an uplifting energy to the 8th, even with the moon still moving through Leo. In fact, as we move to the 9th, and the moon moves into Virgo early in the morning, actually 6:47 a.m. We're now pulling that energy in a little bit. We're being a little bit more cautious, a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? We want to do what's right rather than just do what we're thinking or what we're feeling in the moment. But the other thing that's occurring here, which I think is very interesting, is one of the only aspects that Jupiter is making, outer planet Jupiter, and that is Jupiter is forming trines and sextiles to the nodal axis. In other words, we can see here that the north node of the moon is at 10 degrees of Aries, and the south node is at 10 degrees of Libra. Jupiter at 10 degrees of Gemini is now making, on the 9th, it's making a trine to the south node and a sextile to the north node. And I think, again, this is about a release of energy. It's about something that's happening on a positive level that's giving us hope. And yet, as we move to the 10th, even though this energy from the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th has a lot of sextiles and trines that are showing movement, as we get to the 10th, we have the sun now making a trine to Saturn. Remember, we had Venus trining Saturn a while back, Venus trining Saturn was back on the 2nd, July 2nd. And now as the sun is trining Saturn, again, we're getting a round of stability. There's something here we're able to fix on. But just like the last time where there was a trine to Saturn saying, make it real, be stable, and the sun is trining Saturn, which is giving us that ability to ground and to have a center of gravity and to maybe act with authority. But at the same time, we now have Venus getting ready to change signs from Cancer into Leo. Venus is making a trine with Neptune, and that's exact tomorrow on the 11th. Let's go there. And on the 11th, we can see that by midday, Venus has already moved into Leo. Venus at 29 degrees and 54 minutes of Cancer actually made an exact trine to Neptune at 7:32 a.m. this morning on Thursday, July 11th. And then by 9:18, Venus moved into Leo, and by early tomorrow morning on the 12th, Venus will make an opposition to Pluto, which we're already picking up on the 11th, but it's exact on the morning of Friday the 12th. And this is a difficult dive of emotions because Venus running into Pluto, it has to go really deep. And yet Neptune is the release point here, because Neptune is saying if we can go to a spiritual place, if we can go to our imagination, even when we have to confront Hades, Pluto, the hell realms, the darkness, we can actually gain something from this process as long as we don't avoid it. We have to face it. And this is a very powerful couple of days. And into this, we also have on the 11th, Mercury making a square and a half to Neptune. This again, we're getting the same theme over and over again of the authoritative reality check, of the responsibility and the need to make things real of Saturn. And here Mercury kind of bumping up against Neptune saying, yeah, but I don't know what's real. We're getting the sun trine Saturn, while at the same time, we're getting the sun trine Saturn. We're getting the Venus trine Neptune, and it's confusing because Mercury is making a square and a half to Neptune. It's hard to know what's going on. It's like even if we think we have it down, even if we're acting with caution but determination, it's still, we're not sure that we're doing the right thing. And this whole thing of that, the quote from the very beginning that, that change requires chaos, that there's this sense of things are kind of out of whack, and there's nothing we can really do to pull it all together other than to trust in the process and to make stands where we can along the way. As we move on, so we go to the 12th, and we can see now that Venus is opposed Pluto. And again, that was exact at 7:11 in the morning on Friday the 12th. We also have the moon moving into Libra. It did late last night, actually at 7:06 p.m. And so now the moon is moving through Libra. And by midday on Friday, the moon is going to pick up on a trine to Jupiter. And so we're getting this mixed dance, especially with the moon having just moved into Libra, where it will make a trine, or it made a trine to Pluto late last night on Friday evening, and then it will trine Jupiter. And so we're getting a little bit of air here, a little bit of breathing room on the 12th. But now by the 13th, we have Mars that is actually moving into another aspect with the nodal axis. Remember, we have Jupiter still within range of making, it's slightly past it, but it's still very close to sextiling the north node and trining the south node. And now on the 13th, we have Mars making a half square exactly to the north node and a square and a half to the south node of the moon. And this is now defining or defending our boundaries is complicated, because Mars in Taurus knows what it needs to do in order to make boundaries, but that Mars is getting dangerously close to Uranus. It's almost like something could explode, something could happen, and we don't have a way to control it. And on top of that, with Mars making these hard aspects of anxiousness, of anxiety, of motivation, of disquiet, is that a word? Of lack of calmness. Mars making a half square to the north node. It's kind of making it so that the direction that we're moving in is not necessarily working easily with where we know we need to be going. It might sound crazy, but as we move through the middle of the month, we have a better sense of what this all means. By the 14th, Venus is making a square and a half now to Saturn. Remember, Mercury did that before. And again, it's like the reality check. The rules aren't working. It doesn't feel good. The moon, having moved into Scorpio now, is picking up on a fixed T-square. The moon actually moves into Scorpio at 7:52 a.m. on Sunday morning. That's this morning, July 14th. And as it does, the moon will make a square to Pluto, and then it will make a square to Venus early on in the day. By the middle of the day, the moon actually moves into the square to Venus. This is on the 14th, and by afternoon it's already waning. But on top of that, Venus making this square and a half to Saturn. That's not exact until the evening. It's hard to trust what we're bumping up against. And I think that's good. I don't think we should trust it. I think we should take things right now with what's that saying? With a grain of salt. And especially because we have now the sun moving into a square to Chiron. Remember, we had Mercury first and then Venus making that square. And now we have the sun making the square, the sun making the square to Chiron. It's not exact until the 15th. Let's move to the 15th. And here on the 15th, we can see that the sun at 23 degrees of Cancer is squaring Chiron at 23 degrees of Aries. And once again, it's almost as if I want to say it's almost as if we're hurting that which we try to heal. And it doesn't really have to be that way, except it's almost like the harder we try to fix something, the more we get in the way of what we're trying to fix. And I think here the lesson of the Sun square Chiron is rather than thinking that we know what the solution is, it's okay to be unsure. I mean, the Sun square Chiron often indicates a lack of certainty, a lack of confidence, even a feeling of isolation and alienation, because we want to know what to do and yet we don't. And yet the magic here is that I think it's the actual act of admitting that we don't have the answer, that in a way it's the wound, it's Chiron's wound, and acknowledging that gives us the understanding and the compassion and the tools. It's like it's like it gives us a strength. The strength that we have is the strength of knowing that we don't have to have the answer. And I know that sounds kind of backwards, but it's our empathy, it's our feeling of compassion for not only our own uncertainty, but for other people who are in pain or suffering, or in a way, it's our ability to empathize with others that becomes the breakthrough here. And at the same time, we also have Mercury making a quincunx to Saturn. And remember, these planets were making the sesqui-square to Saturn, as Venus still is. But now as Mercury makes the quincunx to Saturn, it's like, again, the words that we have are not necessarily working. They're creating irritation. They're maybe upsetting because we can't get them across because authority in some ways is blocking us. But watch what will happen over the days ahead as Mercury moves from the quincunx to Saturn into the trine to Chiron. And that Mercury trine Chiron is exact on the 18th. We'll get there in just a moment, but we can't leave the 15th until we talk about the Mars conjunct Uranus, which we've been talking about for several days now. This is exact at 7:04 a.m., and this is significant because this is kind of it's almost like we want to express ourselves even if we have to take a risk. In fact, maybe it's we want to express ourselves because we're willing to take that risk. And yet this is also an attraction to danger. Remember, we still have the sun squaring Chiron. And so this is the wound is obvious, and it's almost like we want to take a risk and demonstrate that we're not wounded, that we're cool, that we can make something happen. And yet I think the lesson of July 14th, 15th, 16th is actually self-restraint. It's self-discipline. It's directing this impulsive desire to just blow it all up. And I don't mean physically, although that certainly can occur. I mean metaphysically. It's our not avoidance. It's our redirection. That's the best word I can think of. It's redirecting our tendency, our impulse to just take down whatever we need to that's in our way, and to show our courage by acting in a way that is constructive rather than destructive, because the danger here is to just kind of lash out. That is the 15th. Also, by the time we get to the 16th, even though the Mars is past Uranus, it's still, only a degree away. And we have now the moon moving through Scorpio. By midday, the moon is opposing Uranus and opposing Mars. And so, in a way, it's the opposite. It's the opposition of the moon to Uranus and Mars that make the Mars-Uranus conjunction that was exact on Monday, yesterday, the 15th. It's almost as if it has staying power. It holds its position. And the moon is also doing something else now, and that is, as the moon is moving through latter degrees of fixed Scorpio water sign, it is trining the sun at 24, almost 25 degrees of Cancer, and it's trining, as it moves through Scorpio, it's going to trine Saturn earlier in the day, and then it will trine Neptune it's about 6 p.m., somewhere in that neighborhood. So we have the moon making a grand water trine and yet it's opposing the Mars-Uranus conjunction that is giving us that way to break out of the self-referential feelings that are internalized, the sun in Cancer, the moon in Scorpio holding the energy in, and the temptation is to just blow it all out. But I think it's really important to pay attention and to hold that energy and to redirect it in ways that are positive. Now, another thing that's going on right now that may not be obvious is that Mercury is beginning to slow down, and Mercury is actually moving into its shadow. It does on the 16th. Mercury actually moves from Leo into Virgo, and it does that on July 25th. And then on August 4th, with Mercury at 4 degrees of Virgo, Mercury turns retrograde, and by the 28th of August, Mercury backs all the way up to 21 degrees of Leo. Now, why is this important? Because here on July 17th, Mercury reaches 21 degrees of Leo, and really Mercury will be moving through this shadow period from July 17th all the way until when it turns direct at the end of August, and then it'll still take time to move through its shadow. So why we're talking about this is that even though Mercury doesn't turn retrograde until the beginning of August, we're already at that point where the aspects that Mercury is now making, the aspects that Mercury makes, will be repeated as Mercury moves backwards, retrograde back through that shadow area. And so we need to begin to pay attention to Mercury by the middle of the month, because it's already beginning to do quirky things that are not necessarily completed, even though we might think that they are completed now. And that includes Mercury's trine to Chiron, which I think is very important because it gives us the ability now to use our self-expression, Mercury in Leo, to do real healing, whereas before it was being blocked. The sun is now past that square to Chiron. It's almost as if we've done some of that hard work, and we now can get the payoff from it. And we also have on July 18th, the sun, we have Mercury making the exact trine to Chiron, and we have the moon having moved into Sagittarius on Tuesday evening on the 16th at 6:24 p.m. By the 18th on Thursday, the middle of the day, the moon is moving through 23 degrees of Sagittarius, while Mercury is making a trine to Chiron, and this has the potential for significant healing. This is a very powerful healing energy, and that Mercury trine to Chiron is we can affect the cures that before were complicating the energy rather than fixing anything. And on top of that, on the 18th, we also have the sun making a sextile to Uranus. And in fact, the sun's sextile to Uranus is very significant because it now is allowing that sudden breakthrough work to happen in a way that can be constructive. And also note that as the sun is creeping up on that last degree of Cancer, it is also building closer and closer over the next couple of days to its exact trine to Neptune, which can be very spiritual, but it also can be very confusing. And in fact, we have that Uranus and Mars that are making sextiles from either side to the sun as the sun is moving toward the trine to Neptune. This is dreamy. This is confusing. We also have Mars moving closer and closer to changing signs, where it's not only going to make that exact sextile sextile to Neptune. It does that on the 20th, but it's also going to, once it moves into Gemini, will make an exact trine to Pluto. We'll get there in just a moment. There's some real magic here. There's some real potential for movement and even positive change that I think we've been waiting for, and hopefully we'll see some good come of this. We are also then seeing here on the 18th this grand fire trine with the moon moving through Sagittarius. And this is about action. This is about bringing things into action, making things happen. And we also note that the moon moves into Capricorn at 1:13 a.m. on the 19th, early in the morning on the 19th, so that by midday on the 19th, we can see the moon is at 6 degrees of Capricorn. But by the time we reach the 20th, we can see now that we can see here on the 20th that Mars at 29 degrees 57 minutes has just made its exact sextile with Neptune at 29 degrees, now backed up to 29 degrees 50 minutes. Mars is playing a very important role now, because at that very last degree of Taurus, it's almost like it's do or die. It's get the work done now, because when Mars goes into Gemini, as it will tomorrow, as it will on, actually, it does late on the 20th. But as it moves into Gemini, it's going to pick up on a trine to the Pluto in Aquarius. And this is all dynamic change. We have here like this minor grand trine configuration with Pluto being trined by Mars and really by Uranus also, although Uranus never reaches that. Uranus will turn retrograde before it reaches that trine. That won't be exact until next year. But we have this dynamic flow of energy between Uranus and Mars, and the trine in particular of Mars to Pluto, and then the sextile of Mars to Neptune, while Neptune is just 1 degree orb away from its sextile to Pluto. All incredibly dynamic as the sun moves into the picture, and as the moon, through latter degrees of Capricorn, we reach the full moon. And the full moon is early in the morning on the 21st at 3:17 a.m. Mars is already in Gemini now, so it's really picking up on the trine to Pluto. But the moon hanging back in Capricorn, opposing the sun at 29 degrees of Cancer, while the sun is making that trine to Neptune. This is confusion and movement forward. We're getting a taste. We're getting a feeling like things are happening, but it's really hard to know what it is and where the energy is going to play out. There's so much going on right now. It's a bit overwhelming. We have Venus making a sextile with Jupiter, 12 degrees of Leo to 12 degrees of Gemini. Again, we have some positive energy here. We think we know what could happen. We have some hope, and yet at the same time, Mercury on the 21st. That, by the way, that Venus sextile Jupiter, which is overindulgence and overdoing. It's being attracted to hope. There was a book that Tim Leary wrote called Confessions of a Hope Fiend. And this is in kind of like the downside of what just having this overconfident hope on the future is. But at the same time, also on the 21st, not only do we have that full moon, which is the second full moon in Capricorn, because we had one a month ago that was at the very first degree of Capricorn. And now again, we have the dilemma of protecting the self versus taking care of the self by changing the outward circumstances, the internal versus the external. And into this, we also then have the same day, we have Mercury at the 26 degrees of Leo, making a square to Uranus. And again, this Uranus energy, this is like saying things without thinking about what we're saying. It's saying it and then kind of thinking, oh, gee, maybe I shouldn't have said that, because that Mercury square Uranus is impulsive in communication. Mars is playing an incredibly dynamic role here because it's at the point of Thales of the full moon and even the sun's ingress into Cancer. The sun's ingress from Cancer, the ingress into Leo, and the moon's movement into Aquarius and its conjunction to Pluto, with Mars kind of at that point of Thales making a sextile, the sun making a sextile to Mars just as it moves from Leo into just as it moves from Cancer into Leo, and Mars as it moves from Taurus into Gemini, making the trine to Pluto, having coming off of the sextile to Uranus. This is the potential here for what could happen is a bit overwhelming. There's a bit of a game changer going on, but it's in a way there's a smoothness to it, and yet there's this totally disruptive energy within the changes that it's really hard to integrate it all. Mars's trine to Pluto is exact in the evening on the 21st, on Sunday evening. And then the sun actually moves into Leo just after midnight on the 22nd. So we're seeing here on the 21st, the sun still at 29.5 degrees of Cancer. As we go to noon on the 22nd on Monday, we now see that the sun has moved into Leo, and the sun is still pushing toward its opposition to Pluto, which is exact at 10:37 p.m. tonight on the 22nd. And now we can also see how Mars is at that point of Thales, where it is sextiling or being sextiled by the sun, and it is trining still to Pluto. This is all very, very powerful and dynamic changes. And the sun is the third of the three planets, Mercury first, then Venus, and then the sun, that have made that exact same transition from internalized, emotional, self-protective, vulnerable Cancer into expressive, get the job done, move it outward into the external environment, Leo, as it's brought in both the dreams and the illusions of Neptune and the actual power and domination of the transformation of those processes that we cannot stop. Remember, Pluto is like the caterpillar becoming the butterfly. Once the process starts, it's not going to stop. It's going to play on through. So that takes us up through the 22nd. We have a couple of quiet days. On the 23rd, Venus makes a square and a half to Neptune. Again, it's the confusion that comes back. This month is a mixture between over-certainty, over-expansion, confusion, dreams. They're all playing in there in the transformation, and yet we're not getting movement from the outer planets, as I said at the very beginning. On the 21st, we had the moon moving into Aquarius. I think I mentioned that, but I didn't give a time. That's at 4:42 a.m. And then on Tuesday, the 23rd, the moon moves from Aquarius into Pisces at 6:22 a.m. We can see here by noon on the 23rd that the moon is already at 3.5 degrees of Pisces on the 23rd. And then as we continue to move ahead, by the 25th, at 7:52 a.m., the moon moves into Aries. And by noon on the 25th, we can see that the moon is at 2.5 degrees of Aries. And the other thing that's happening is that Mercury is now at 29 degrees and 53 minutes of Leo, making quincunxes with both Neptune first, before it changes signs, and then Pluto just after it moves from Leo into Virgo, and Mercury moves from Leo into Virgo at 3:41 p.m. on Thursday the 25th. Also, on the 25th, we now have the Sun making a sextile with Mars. Remember, it made that sextile with Uranus a couple of days ago. Its sextile with Uranus was this impulsive action that was kind of almost like out of control, just doing things. By the way, that was on the 20th. And now on the 25th, the Sun makes a sextile with Mars, which gives us the strength to follow through. And yet the Sun is now in Leo, so it's kind of acting out of self-will, out of self-expression. And Mars is in Gemini, which is basically, it's a lighter energy, but there's surprises here. We're moving in directions that we didn't expect that we would be moving in. Also, on the 26th, the following day, here on Friday the 26th, very early in the morning, just after midnight, we'll be feeling this on Thursday the 25th. The Sun not only makes that sextile with Mars, but it makes a square and a half with Saturn. Once again, we have that problem of bumping up against authority. Something's not working. In fact, on the 26th, we also have Venus making a quincunx with Saturn. Saturn is in the picture right now. The authority does not look good. I mean, when I say it does not look good, there's things that are limiting our action that we just can't get around. Mercury moved into Virgo, is making the quincunx exact with Pluto this afternoon at 5:49 p.m. There's a whole lot of stuff going on here, and on top of all of that, Chiron is stationed. It turns retrograde technically at 6:58 a.m., but again, we can go. I mean, Chiron was at 23 degrees and 32 minutes of Aries back on July 22nd, 4 days ago, and it will remain at 23 degrees and 32 minutes all the way through the end of the month. Actually, on July 31st, it moves backwards 1 minute of arc to 23 degrees, 31 minutes. So Chiron is really, really stationed right now. And into this, we have some real complicated energy, especially with Mercury making those quincunxes. And we also have now Venus coming into a trine to Chiron. Remember, we had that Mercury making the trine to Chiron earlier, and that was the ability to use our words to get some healing power. And now we have Venus coming into that trine to Chiron. That's exact on the 30th. Incidentally, here on the 28th, we can see that the moon has moved into Taurus. It moves into Taurus. Actually, it moved into Taurus on the morning of the 27th at 10:22 a.m. And yet by the 28th, we can see that it is already in mid-Taurus. There's not a lot going on from other planetary movement until we get to the 30th. The moon moves into Gemini on the 29th, and that moon will, by midday on Monday the 29th, will line up, late morning, will line up with Uranus, and then it will move into Gemini at 2:27 p.m., where over the next couple of days, the moon will line up with Mars and Jupiter. Now, the other thing is that we end the month on the 30th with Venus making that exact trine to Chiron. Now, Venus is technically, making that trine to Chiron while Chiron is stationary retrograde. But again, this is less about our words now. And in fact, with Mercury in Virgo, our words are very important, but they're not going to accomplish a whole lot. Why? Because Mercury turns retrograde before it gets very far into Virgo. It does that on August 4th. And it doesn't even reach the square to Mars. In fact, we have that Mercury kind of pushing up against the action here, but it retrogrades back, and then it will make the squares to Uranus again a second and third time over the days and weeks ahead. But we do end the month on a bit of a positive note as Venus makes that trine to Chiron. And as Venus trines Chiron, it gives us the hope of being able to heal something finally. Whether we do or not, or whether we can or not, is a slightly different issue. But we kind of have the ability now. There's an opening for basically seeing the positive, seeing the beauty. Even in the wound, we kind of can help others and even help ourselves to realize potentials that we may have given up on that have kind of fallen away. So all in all, this is a pretty radical month. There's a lot going on again, but again, I want to stress the point that although there's so much going on, that we don't still have the answers that we're seeking. And of course, a lot of those answers are about long-term resolution to the political situation here in the United States, which even if you're outside of the United States, is still going to have impact. And we're seeing this closing down of options happening with conservative right-wing energy building in France, in the United States, and other places. Now, what happens, it's still way too early to call on this. But I think July is an incredibly dynamic month. It's really important for us to choose our battles wisely. I don't think I've ever seen a time where it's more important to think, act, move strategically than it is to just do what seems right in the moment. Because I think there's going to be a lot of things that come up, even in our personal lives, in our, certainly in our social, cultural, political, economic lives, where it seems like we should be doing one thing, but when we really look at the deeper picture, we can see that there's a larger game being played here. And it's really important for us to think cosmically, to think the bigger picture, and then when we act locally, to do it in a way that is more strategic than just doing what feels good in the moment. That's it. It's a powerful month. I'll have a lot more to say about the second half of the month for those of you who are Solar Tier Patreon supporters. Remember, it helps me if you like this video, if you thumbs up it, if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, and certainly if you subscribe to my email list. That'll put you in the hat for the drawing for next month's mini reading on harmonics on your natal chart. And always there's patreon.com/Rick Levine if you want to get the mid-month update that really drills down on the second half of the month in a much deeper level. That's it for now. Thank you all for your ongoing support. And as always, think cosmically, act locally. I'm Rick Levine.